Good afternoon, students. Today I want to talk about creating our Windows Presentation Foundation project. Now this tends to be something that seems to trip up a lot of students, so I figured I'd record a video walking you through the process, telling you what you need to be very careful about as you create that project to make sure that you create the right kind of project, because a lot of times students somehow create the wrong one. So let's walk through that. We're going to start by having our solution for GyroScope open. And we're going to go in and create a new project. So you can find in the menu, add and new project. And the type of project we want is a Windows Presentation Foundation application, or a WPF applications. That is a desktop, and you can just put on that filter, or you can just search for WPF, and it should be amongst the first hits you get. And what we want is a WPF application, a project for creating a .NET Core, and that's very important. It should be a .NET Core WPF application, not a .NET Framework application. So be sure it says .NET Core. Now, it also needs to be a .NET Core 5.0, and so if we walk through the wizard process, we're going to add our app. This should actually be called the point of sale, and you're going to create it inside your normal WPF or your GyroScope project. You want to make sure that that target framework is .NET 5.0. If it's not, or if that is not available here, that means you need to update Visual Studio. So let's walk through that process. So the first thing you might want to do is go to Help and check for updates. And this will allow you to update your Visual Studio to the latest version. And that's necessary in some cases to support .NET Core 5.0 because it added some new ways of doing things that the older version of Visual Studio wasn't ready for. So it does have to be updated to a fairly recent version. And you can see there, I am currently at 16.10.4, and it's ready to update me to 16.11.3. So there's a lot of new updates there. I'm not going to actually do that at this point because I am far enough along that I can create a .NET 5.0 app. But if you need to, you might need to update that. The other thing you need to make sure is that you have the workflow enabled for that. So if you go to Tools, go to Get Tools and Features. That also opens the Visual Studio installer, but here it's going to open the modifying dialog, which shows you all the different things you can install within Visual Studio. So what we want to make sure is checked is this .NET Desktop Development. That needs to be checked. Notice it says Build WPF, Windows Forms, and Console Applications using C# and a bunch of other things. So we want to make sure that that is checked. And over here, if we come into the individual items, we want to make sure that we have, this should already be checked, but you can go through and look for the different frameworks. And we really just want that .NET Core 5.0. That's what we're working with right now. So as long as you have that and you've updated Visual Studio, that should get you there. And if it doesn't, then you might also have to install .NET Core 5.0, and you can do that with just a simple Google search for .NET 5.0, and what you want is the SDK. So this should be downloaded with those packages. If for some reason it's not, you want probably the Windows SDK, the x64 version if you're on a 64-bit machine, or x86 if you have the old x86 processors. And that should take care of everything you need. Make sure that you have those. Once you have those, you can go ahead and, like I said, create that project. So to create the project, we're just going to add a new project. We're going to call it, it's going to be a WPF application using .NET Core. Call it point of sale. That should be targeting .NET 5.0. And just because you were able to do the exercises doesn't mean you've necessarily got the correct version, because the exercises were actually written using an earlier version of WPF. So this is potentially a slightly different version that we're running on for the actual project. But this is what you're going to be graded against, so it needs to be that particular version. Now, the other thing you're going to notice is that once you install this takes a long time to finish installing. What's going on is it's actually going out and downloading a bunch of packages that it needs to actually do the WPF work. And once those are installed, then it should all pop in. A couple other things to be aware of with WPF apps. The design viewer will only show your control if you have built that control. So if you're wondering why it's not showing up and you've just written a bunch of code but you haven't saved and you haven't built the project, that is why. Because this is actually running as a service that looks at your compiled DLL and pulls out the design from that DLL. So if it's not compiled, it can't actually display it because it doesn't know what it's supposed to look like. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Let's see, another thing is every now and then when it builds these files, the XAML files themselves are, during the build process, converted into a C# file, and sometimes those files get corrupted. So if you're having trouble compiling, one of the tricks you may have to do is do a clean on your project. So go to the build menu, run clean, and then recompile, and that might shake that loose when that happens. That is what you need to know to get started on this project. So go ahead and do that, and then you can carry on with the rest of the assignment.